Well, good morning or almost afternoon, everybody. It's Friday, November the 13th, and thought I would change location today for you. Got tired of being in my office. Maybe you get tired of seeing me there. So, change the surroundings, and I want to take you through our teaching in preparation for our Simple Church gatherings this coming Sunday. We'll be meeting in the four simple churches that we have designed and set up for this time that we're in, and also a Zoom at noon on Sunday as usual. But want to just continue to encourage you not only to be viewing these videos, but to be coming together. I'm concerned that not all of us are coming together and aren't taking advantage and seeing the need to be together. With all that's going on, with all the information that we're getting and the things that we're hearing and seeing, there's something that cannot be replaced about just being together and to remember that our lives interact with one another. We can't solve all the big problems in the world that are going on right now, but we can relate to one another. And I believe that's what God has designed us to do and why He's created the church as it is, a family of families, people relating to one another, talking together, praying together, eating together. We're going to do that this Sunday right after Thanksgiving in our simple churches, each bringing our own meal and sharing it together, not with one another in that case still. But we're going to be doing those things because we are a family of families. The church is not a Sunday event, and online or otherwise, it is a family. And that means people getting together, relating to one another, crying together, laughing together, working together, thinking together, worshiping together, singing together. We need to do that. And I encourage you, please make it a priority to gather either in person or online with us on Sunday. You make a difference. When you're not there, it changes the chemistry of things. Every single one of you makes an addition to that. And I want you to know and to believe that and to make that a commitment. That's a very, very basic way of responding to Jesus' love for us. He died to create the church, not just to save us individually. He died to create the church and to create this family. It brings great honor and blessing and glory to the Lord, and we show how precious He is to us when we demonstrate how precious we are to one another. So please keep that in mind and continue to encourage one another in those things as well. Let me take you to the teaching slides for today. And again, these things will be sent to you in the email later on when this video is prepared. The slides that you can look at, the video to watch, and I've got some special challenges, a little bit unique this week, a question to keep in mind that'll sort of be the focus of our discussion on Sunday morning. So let's get right into it. So again, we are continuing on in our series in First Peter, and let me make a couple of adjustments here so that you guys can see my slides and I can see them very, very quickly here. I'll be looking mostly at the computer, so bear with me as the camera remains fixed on me. I think it's good for you to see me speaking, and then I can step up and look up and talk with you guys directly from time to time too. We are a family of families who worship and follow Jesus as Lord by learning to think and live wisely together by His Spirit so that we can impact our city and world in the way of Christ and His apostles. I bring that to you because that frames everything that we are and everything that we do. And I continue to think about this. I know we have it often in front of you, and it's in the grace notes each week. But stop and think about that. Use this as a motive for prayer. Lord, help us to become fully and completely this. It's very much designed around Christ's plan and His purposes and some of the things even we look at in this teaching today. And I'll probably be doing some specific teaching on this, taking some of these ideas and unfolding them in the future here. This has been a great week. We just completed last night the Build virtual conference for 2020. You see in this slide a meeting that I was in on Thursday morning with leaders all over Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, all the way to Southeast Asia. Each one of these guys is involved in training leaders and networks of churches in different languages and places, much like the work that I'm doing in Albania and we're doing together here in our area in the way of Christ and the apostles. And I cannot stress to you how important it is that we grasp and understand that idea. That is the idea that draws all of us together. Jesus died and prayed and lives now to create one church worldwide, rooted in his plan. And that plan is there in the New Testament. It's very much the story that we have been invited into. And the New Testament tells the story of those first century churches so that we can know how we are to engage with that story and how we're to work together with others. And that's what we're doing. That's what we have been doing in this virtual conference over the last 5 weeks. I want you to pray for these guys. Each one of them carries a tremendous amount of responsibility and burden, not only for their churches, but in some cases whole countries. Hundreds of churches, if not thousands of them. And we are a part of that. We are doing the same kinds of things that they are doing, engaging in first principles, trying to train our young people, get our families strong, our children, trying to figure out how to make a difference in the cities and the cultures that we live in. We're all part of that work, and we're partners in it. And so we have a common covenant with the Lord and with one another. So pray for them. And this frames the foundation of what our missionary or mission work is. This is where our emphasis is as a church, being part of this not only in our own area but around the world, helping to establish and strengthen the churches that are there, and deploying resources. In some cases, people, but in many cases, training and funding in order to see all of us progressing well in the progress of the gospel. We've very much turned away from traditional missionary patterns over the years and have transitioned to this, which is much more in line with the New Testament, working with teams of leaders and networks of churches while we ourselves are doing the same kinds of things. And it creates true and lasting partnerships with it. So a lot of things going on, and I could speak all day to the things that these guys are doing. But you can see a few of them there, and it's been a very productive time. So thanks for your prayers for that. We will pray together on Wednesday night at 7, as we usually do. Continue to pray for the specific needs among us, but we also need to be praying about the larger issues. So come prepared to talk about and pray for the big things as well as the everyday life-to-life things that are going on between us. I don't call them small things because they're not. There are things that matter to our church family and our lives together. But we do that each week. We'll start up again on the video series this week, looking at the wisdom books. I'll get that study guide out to you on Tuesday. But you can already go ahead and start looking at the Proverbs video in the wisdom series of the Bible Project. Go to their YouTube page or go to their website, BibleProject.com. Look up those theme videos, find the playlist on the wisdom series, and you'll be able to find the Proverbs video there as well. And get involved, even if you're just online to watch it and you aren't able to do anything in preparation for it. Jump in online with us on Thursday at 7 o'clock. Sit and listen. Set up your computer or your tablet or phone at the table, and after dinner, just sit and listen and participate with us. Do that with your kids. Again, we're trying to create these opportunities, and with the Zoom connections and things that we're making, there's no reason that most of us, if not all of us, cannot participate in this. And it's an opportunity I don't want any of you to be missing, because it puts inputs into our lives and help us to think in the way of Christ and the apostles, to be frank. We're going to continue to just take the safeguards. We're cleaning regularly. So for those of you who have any concern about the safety of coming and meeting in person, everyone wears a mask when you're in the buildings, keeping that social distance. We're meeting in different places, ventilating as best we can. We are right there where not only the CDC but the state of New Jersey requires us to be. So we're doing well at that, and let's continue to do that. And I encourage you, have confidence in coming and meeting in person for that short time. We're going to keep it brief to an hour and 15 minutes. And again, taking all the precautions that we need to take care of one another and love one another in that way. And again, meeting in such a way that we can interact with one another. Last week we met all together, and that was still discussion oriented, as I had put a video out before. We need to maximize the time that we're together to have interaction with one another and to talk and to hear and to listen and to think together. So that's what we were trying to do when we come together, is to maximize that time for that purpose. But come in confidence and come in joy and hope and peace and love. It's important that we come together, and we are going to do that in a responsible and a safe way, and we will continue to do that. We have a very good pattern established, and I'm confident we'll continue that way, and we'll respond to any further restrictions that come down the road, believing and assuming that those are for the good of not only us but all of our city and state here. So please keep that in mind, and continue to pray for one another and protect one another. We have some among us that are still dealing with COVID and its recovery, but beyond that, let's come together in faith, hope, and love when we do. I want to move into the teaching for today, and that is moving on in 1 Peter 2, 9-10, and this is really forms the end of, or the ends the foundation that Peter lays for us as he begins to address issues going forward about the challenge of living as a Christian, living as God's new people in the world, and living in a home that God is now creating for us here, but will fully be expressed when Jesus returns. And he talks in this passage today about rulers and priests, and that's another way in which God has made his presence known in the world by the tasks and the vocations that he's given us to do. It's what he's provided for and made possible now in Christ Jesus, in the gospel of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection and coming again. It sets the agenda for who we are and what we do and how we do it as well. And this will form the basis for what we'll see Peter talking about and addressing in the weeks to come. And we're going to continue on with this series through the end of the year and into the first part of January as well. So again, our task here really is just to immerse ourselves in the apostles' teaching. We're learning to think together. We're learning to interpret the word together. This is the task of the church. We've been given this story and the windows into this story of the New Testament churches that Jesus brought about by virtue of his finished work. And we're part of that. And so part of that task is coming together and talking about these things and thinking them through together. It is not my job to dispense information to you guys so that you can go on about your lives with everything figured out. It's my task to lead you and to guide you into thinking these things through together, and especially applying the things that we're reading from the scriptures and from the apostles' teaching here, and looking out and seeing what problems they address or what issues they address in our own midst or in the world that we live in. And so that's what we're doing together. We want to take these things and figure out their significance for us today. I came across a book that I've had on my shelf for a while, and it's not one that you exactly cozy up to. You can see how thick that baby is, but this is a wonderful, wonderful introduction to the New Testament. And I was with Scott at a lecture back in, I guess probably a year ago now, or just shy of a year ago now, that the author and presented what this is, and it's an author that I quote often, N.T. Wright, along with others who have compiled a really great background to the New Testament. Helps you understand. It's called the New Testament in its world, and it helps you understand the world of the first Christians and the nature of the teaching and what was going on. It's a really, really great primer for that. There's also some accompanying videos that go with this that we may engage in sometime as part of our discussions together. But one of the in the early part of this book, he says this: the phrase New Testament is simply a way of saying New Covenant. And a covenant isn't something you study at a distance. It's something you sign on for, or rather, something God calls you to be part of. The whole New Testament is for, or rather, something God calls you to be part of. The whole New Testament is written not exactly to create the new world and the new covenant relationship. God has done that in Jesus and is doing it in the Spirit, but to tell the story of that new world, that new relationship, in such a way that we, the readers, are drawn into that relationship and that world. This is a really good way to think about the New Testament. It tells the story of that world that was brought to birth by Jesus' finished work, and particularly his resurrection and the giving of his Spirit, and the new community and the new family that it formed. And we learn their story, and we see the teaching that they received, and we understand that that's the new world that we've been invited into as well, because of our response to the gospel and what God has invited us into, and what we're inviting others into as well. And so I hope that helps you think about the New Testament. Not a rule book, not a guidebook. It's not a how-to book. I know I've heard the acronym Bible, biblical instructions before leaving earth. Please forget that phrase. That is not what the Bible is. The Bible introduces us to the world and God's story as God has designed it to be. And it's not about what to do when we go away, so we can be prepared to go away somewhere else. It's about what God is doing here now and what he will eventually do here and now, and how he wants us to be pointing towards that and living our lives in accordance with it as well. We're, again, working from the design pattern and the structure that we have here from the Bible Project guys. Again, just as a means of unifying around it, but an expression that's already there, but one that I again, very much am in line with in terms of what Peter is doing here. We need to understand his intention and how he's structured that, and that's what you have in this poster here that they put together, and there's an explanatory video of that I encourage you to go back to time and time again, because as we study the individual passages, we're just looking at two passages to do, two verses today. We got to have the whole of Peter's letter in mind, and even the context of what he's writing. We have to carry both of those things in our head, and these videos and the instruction that we get from them are really, really helpful for us to be able to do that. We have to work at both levels at the same time, not only in the forest, but looking at the individual trees. And that's one of the challenges, and why we, it's such a process we do together, but each one of you as individuals and families need to be thinking and talking about these things. We're living with the matter. We're living with Peter's letter for a while, and we're doing that together. And it's what unites us and where our focus is. And in the process of that, God is going to teach us and encourage us and even show us what to do as a result. So we're looking at this first foundational piece that I said here, this new family identity. If you look at those three columns on the right. And Peter is identifying the new people of God as the renewed Israel because of who Jesus is and what he has done. That the things that Israel in the Old Testament was just pointing towards has now come to fruition in both the former Jew and former Gentiles who are now part of this new family. And that's the foundation that Peter is laying here for these people that are scattered around Asia, northern Asia Minor in this case, and living in a world that's not understood who they are and is opposing them, even causing trouble for them because of their newfound faith in Christ, their allegiance and loyalty to him over and against their previous loyalties. And we live in a world too that calls us to other loyalties and other allegiances. And so this teaching from Peter is very, very relevant for us who are scattered around the globe just as they were then, but thinking of this particularly in our own culture and time. And the point that he's moving toward today is really kind of, again, the summary of this section, and that is, or the culmination, I should say, of it, that we are now have a unique task and unique vocation in the world because of what Christ has done and who he has made us. We talked about becoming a temple. We talked about becoming a born again new people, new creation. And Peter's going to draw all those things together to this ultimate task. Okay, well, here's what God has done, and here's who you are. Now here's the task that you're given. You have a special, unique task. He's been pointing to this earlier on when we talked about holiness, being set apart for a specific task. Here's the task right here, and we need to think through and understand and use our imaginations to understand to think through what this looks like in our time and place. But one of the first challenges I want to give to you as you read these passages week in and week out is, how would you summarize this passage in your own words? What does it mean? I give you my ideas and my thoughts, but I want you to do the same yourself. If anything, just take 5 minutes or take 10 minutes, however it is. Write it down if you can, or just think about it or talk about it, around the dinner table, whatever you can do. Again, we want to live with this matter and see it bear fruit in our lives and our thinking. Here was my summary of what I thought the meaning and significance of last week's passage was for us. This is from chapter 2, verses 1 to 8. Just as in the Old Testament, the people of God were destined to have God's powerful presence among them, that has now been brought to its fuller realization in the whole world for all peoples by Jesus. Not just for Israel anymore, but for the whole world, as it was promised to Abraham. We are the hot spot of God's presence in the world. That's one way of thinking about what it means to be the church, to be God's people, and in service to Him and His world. This requires us to embrace it deeply together and become fully committed to it. We need to be fully committed to and fully understand what God has done for us and is calling us to in the world. And we need to do that together. It's been designed to be a team sport, a community activity, not an individual faith that we hold to privately with the hope and assurance of what's going to happen to us when we die. It's so much more than that. So much more than that. Such a limited understanding and an ineffective way of thinking about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Why is it essential then that we understand our task in the world as royal priests? Have you ever thought about it? What does it even mean anyway? What's it mean to be a royal priest? Think about that. We'll talk about that on Sunday, but I'll give you some of my thoughts here related to the passage. But, how would you answer this question if someone read this passage and came up to you on the street and said, I was reading 1 Peter the other day, like you asked me to, and this royal priest idea, what is that? What does it be to be a royal priesthood, a chosen nation, a chosen people? Here's the passage, 1 Peter 2, 9 to 10. We're just looking at these two verses. You are not like that. We'll have to figure out what he's referring to in just a second. For you are a chosen people. You are royal priests, a holy nation, God's very own possession. As a result, you can show others the goodness of God, for He called you out of the darkness into His wonderful light. And again, I'm quoting from the New Living Translation. Really come to appreciate the straightforward language and the simplicity here, and therefore I'm using it a lot. He's drawing on some passages from Peter, as you would expect him to do, growing up as a Hebrew and former Jew, who's now a follower of Christ, or a fulfilled Jew, I guess you would say, who's now recognized his Messiah. He's drawing on Old Testament passages when he talks like this, being a chosen people, God's chosen people, royal priests, nation, God's possession. Those are the kinds of things we see echoed in the Old Testament. And now Peter's drawing them forward to these group of people who don't have that as their backstory. They didn't come from that ethnicity. They came from different groups worshiping different gods in different places and different languages. And now they're part of one people. And you can see what he's trying to do in uniting them and understanding who they are and what they're now doing. He's quoting the first example you see here from Exodus, where God is talking to the people through Moses just before giving them the Ten Commandments. This is the chapter right before the giving of the Ten Commandments. And he says this, "You have seen what I did to the Egyptians. You know how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. I did all that," God says. "Now, here's what you need to do. If you will obey me and keep my covenant, you will be my own special treasure from among all the peoples on earth, for all the earth belongs to me." Important statement. "And you will be my kingdom of priests, my holy nation. This is the message you must give to the people of Israel." So God's instruction to Moses, who are we? What's all this about? Why did God do all this for us and bring us out of Egypt and through the Red Sea and wiping out Pharaoh's army and now leading us to this mountain and God's presence up there? What's going on? here's what's going on. I'm going to enter in a special partnership with you, different from all the other countries or peoples of the world, but for them, because all the earth belongs to me. They belong to me too, but I'm going to use you to demonstrate that, demonstrate who I am. You're going to be for me a kingdom. I'm your king. You're my people. We're gonna work together and be a set apart people, a set apart nation with a special task that's going to be related to all those other people. And that's what you see Peter echoing here. He also, you see, I highlighted here this idea that you can show others the goodness of God. Here's the task. What are we doing all this for? What does it mean to be in the minimal task? What does it mean to be a kingdom of priests? Well, it's the outcome that it's geared towards is that we are to show others the goodness of God. We're the means by people see who God is and what He's like, and that's an awesome task when you think about it. Being the ones who are to reflect the nature and the purpose and the identity of the Creator into the world, so that others can see Him and follow the path that we have out of darkness into light as well. Again, this is something that God has initiated, but it then creates a task and a vocation for us. So we're saved by grace through faith. We're saved because of what God has done, and we're responding to what He's done in Jesus. But we then enter into a partnership with Him, a relationship with Him, a covenant that says, okay, we're also going to do these things in light and in response to what you have done. We talk about these categories of kerugma, what God has done for us, the proclamation of that in Jesus, and the didache, the teaching, the things that shape our lives and orient us around to living in accordance with what God has done, living in response and toward the purpose for which God has done what He's done in Christ Jesus and is leading us to by the Spirit. Another passage in the Old Testament Peter's drawing from, praise His glorious name forever. Let the whole earth be filled with His glory. Amen and amen. Showing others, showing the rest of the nations, just like Israel was called to do, because God possesses the nations. He created all that there is. And so God's vision is always not just for us, to sort of separate us and take care of us and let the rest of the world go its own way, but to use us to draw them to Himself and at least provide the opportunity to respond to Him by seeing our lives and seeing how we go about things. Doesn't mean all will, and there are consequences to that. We saw that in the last passage. That's what he talked about in stumbling over the stumbling stone. Some people stumble over Christ, have to avoid Him, have to ignore Him because it gets in the way of their own ambitions or their own thinking about the way things should be. But for us, we don't stumble over Christ. We build our lives on. We say, "Oh, this isn't something to avoid or to get around. This is the place to build your life on. This is the thing that God is doing. We know who He is and what He's doing because of Jesus. Let's build our lives there. Let's build our families, our community there, our purpose in the world there." That sets a very different agenda for those who stumble over that, who avoid Jesus or come into conflict with Him. You get the picture of stumbling over a stone. You can either build on that stone, or you can trip over it, or try to figure out how to blast it out of the way and pretend like it's not there or eliminate it. There's two very different paths there, relation to the same stone. The Jesus who we said is the Ben, the Son, and also the Eben, the stone, in our discussions last week. Numbers 14 talks about this too. As surely as I live, as surely as the earth is filled with the Lord's glory, not one of these people will ever enter that land. Here's the judgment on Israel for disobeying their part of the covenant. They've all seen my glorious presence and the miraculous signs I performed both in Egypt and in the wilderness, but again and again they have tested me by refusing to listen to my voice. Israel failed in its vocation, but God's plan and purposes was always about the earth that is filled with the Lord's glory. The earth was designed, and all the peoples that are in it that are designed to be in right relationship with Him and reflecting His glory and His goodness. This is the high calling of all peoples, and Israel had failed in being the primary example of that in partnership with God, and therefore God sent Jesus to fulfill that plan and to do what Israel had failed to do, and we see that very, very early on in the story here in Numbers. Commentary on this passage from N.T. Wright's popular commentary. Again, I encourage all of you, if you want a great set of companion books to go with your Bible, this whole series on the New Testament, the Everyone series, is available on Amazon and probably even electronically in some form. But his quote on this passage goes like this: "All these things were spoken before of ethnic Israel. Peter believed that all God's promises to Israel had been fulfilled in the Messiah, Jesus himself, and that therefore all who belonged to Jesus had now been brought into that people of God, that true temple. The one true God was now living in them. The temple had been rebuilt, not in Jerusalem, but all around the world. That is the great truth on which everything else in the letter will depend." And so you can see Peter getting to the culmination point. But there's an important point here, that God has not replaced Israel. God has fulfilled what Israel had intended to be in Jesus. Jesus was for and on God's behalf Israel, what Israel had always intended to be. And because he had done that, because that had happened, now that promise could go out into the world. Israel had succeeded. Jesus had succeeded where Israel had failed, and carried God's promise and his purpose, but even had taken on himself the judgment that belonged to God's people for their failure in their partnership. He did all of that in himself, so that then others, including Israel, could return to God's plan and purposes for the world, for them, for their families, and bring everyone else in on the act. Everything hinges around Jesus. It's not that God has transferred what he wanted to do through Israel. He's given up on them, and he's decided to do that through other people because these people just showed themselves unworthy of it. No. The plan was through Israel. That plan came to its fulfillment in Jesus, who was Israel's representative, their Messiah. And because of that, now God's purposes can go out on into the world. That's why Peter is saying the things that he's saying and applying the things that he's applying to them, who were not people originally born into that ethnic group. So some core ideas here. One, we're not like others who stumble over Christ, as if he is in the way of our view of things or our lives. He's the way and the very foundation of our lives. This is essential. Jesus is the one thing we all have to build our lives on. If you are not building your life on Jesus, you are building your life on a house of cards, on sand, and it will come back to get you. There are consequences to it. It's the way God has designed things. We either rely upon him and build our lives in him, or we stumble over him. There's no other way about it. There's no our way that is successful. It's God's way. And that's the call of the gospel. Come be part of this and see how God has done. Why would you stumble over the Christ who gave himself for you and loved you and sacrificed himself for you? There's nothing to stumble over there, unless you're so focused on yourself and your own ways and your own pride that you refuse to receive what God has done for you. And God will allow that to go on until the consequences of your own decisions catch up with you. And that's the choice that all of us face. Israel's calling and identity is passed on to Jesus' followers, including us, because of Jesus. It's because of our faith in Jesus that Israel's vocation and calling comes to us, to be God's people for the world, to be a kingdom of priests. He is Israel's Messiah and representative. If you belong to him, that makes it all happen. Belonging to Jesus gives us this task and this vocation. There's no other way that it comes to us except by what he has done and our faith and our trust and our loyal following of him. The calling of God's people was always to worship him alone as the creator God and to serve the world on his behalf. They are the bridge between the holy and the corrupt. That's what it means to be a priest. That's what it means to rule on God's behalf, to be the bridge between the God who created all things and the redemptive work that he wants to do in the world, and the corrupt world on the other hand. A kingdom of priests is the bridge between those two things. A priest serves as an intermediary, a bridge between God and the world. And that's what we've been called to do. And to do that in a royal way, in a way that is in service to the world's true Lord and King, Jesus himself. So a royal priesthood. It's a Jesus-shaped identity and purpose and the means to an end, to show off God and his mighty deeds to the world. That's what needs to happen. The world needs to know how wonderful and how loving and how powerful our God is. Not the love of power, which we see unfolding around us so much these days, but the power of love. That's where true power lies. The power of love is where true life is, power lies, and it's in Jesus. And our calling is to live that out as his disciples and representatives, not just as individuals, but as families and as a family of families in the world. That's what the world needs. The world needs a kingdom of priests that we're called to be in order to know its creator and his loving ways and his power in unique ways, and become part of that story and become part of that people themselves. Why is it so important always to remember who we are and who we were and who we have become and how? Never forget where we were. Peter's calling them, never forget what happened to you and never forget where you are now and how that happened. That transaction between where you were and where you are now is always a matter of what Jesus has done. It's always about Jesus, and he comes back to that here. Once you had no identity as a people, now you are God's people. Once you received no mercy, now you have received God's mercy. When you hang your hat on something that's absolutely true, here it is. You did not belong to God's people at one time prior to your faith in Jesus. You did not know mercy had you received mercy prior to knowing Jesus. Now that you know him, these two things are absolutely 150% true for you. You are God's people. You're part of God's people, and you have received God's mercy. God has shown his love and his forgiveness to you, and that is not, only he can remove that, and he won't. And he will not, because we have, it's been given to us out of his love and generosity and received as a gift. Again, it turns around Jesus. Is he precious to us, as Peter said in the passage last week? If he's not, it's because you haven't really grasped who he is and what he's done for you and where you were and where he's brought you. You need to think deeply about it. You need to thank him for it each and every day. You need to celebrate that together with God's people. Let's never forget how precious Jesus is to us and for us, and therefore how precious we are to him and to God himself. If Jesus was precious to God, it's precious to us, we're precious to God. And we're all part of his plan and his purposes, because Jesus was God himself come to reveal himself to us and to give us direction and purpose into his future. He draws in this passage from passage in Hosea. At that time I will plant a crop of Israelites and raise them for myself. Hosea is writing in the time of God's judgment on Israel in exile, but looking forward to what he's going to do. I will show love to those I called not loved, and on those I called not my people, I will say, now you are my people. And they will reply, you are our God. You are our God. When we look to Jesus and we look to what he's done, what happened to him and his resurrection and his coming again, we look at him and we say, you are our God. You are our King. Who were we before? What value and identity did we possess that really mattered or was worth living or dying for? Compare anything that you ever knew or could possibly know, and it's on offer in the world around us, and compare it to what Jesus has done for us and the calling he's made for us. What matters? What will ultimately matter in the things that we see around us? What are you living for? Young people, what are you looking forward to? What do you think is the most important thing out there in life? School and career and family and all kinds of things come along, but they cannot and they must not ever replace what's really worth living for and dying for, and that is Jesus himself and his plan as his purposes through us. That's what matters. In the end, that's all that matters. And for those of us later on in life, no matter what happens, no matter what concerns, no matter what worries or stresses or anxieties, what matters is Jesus. And that's a sure thing. That's a sure thing. That gives us the confidence and ability to be to do the tasks and the vocation, to be the kingdom of priests he's called us to be. So how that has all changed in light of all God has done, is doing and will do. That's the Bible's worldview. We need to be in touch with a larger story. That's why reading through the scriptures, that's why studying the themes and the things we've done in the video series and whatnot, you have to place yourself within this larger story. It's not enough to find a great passage here or to memorize this or memorize that. You need to have the whole story and be growing in your understanding and reflection of it. That's why it's very, very important to develop a biblical worldview and to help your children develop a biblical worldview as early as possible, because then you can place yourself within it and live wisely. and understand the key role and the significance that Jesus has in that larger picture. Who was really concerned about us enough to do anything about our plight on heaven or earth? How amazing it is that the one true God has shown each of us both specific concern and help just as we needed it. God responded to all of your personal and unique needs in Jesus at the same time for everybody. Everybody coming from these different backgrounds and different issues and different things. And he solves them all in one way, with Jesus himself. God come in human form and revealed that. That's a wonderful thing to think about. And you can see how powerfully that unites us and gives us all the same task and the same vocation. I'm going to go to the core ideas here. And some summary ideas, again, that I'm going to leave with you at the end here, and that is that only by being firmly anchored in the truth of who Jesus is and who we ourselves are as his followers will we be able to live in the way the rest of this letter urges us to. That's a really important point that we've gotten to at the end of this section in chapter 2, verse 10. So consider what that means. And here's the thing I want to leave with you and to talk about when we get together on Sunday, both in person at 10 a.m. in our simple churches or on Zoom at noon at 12 o'clock. And that is this: what problem or issues in our lives, ministry, and culture today are being addressed by Peter here? How do we take the things that we talked about today and connect them to a set of problems or issues that we have out there? I've thought through this and will continue to think through this myself and give you my thoughts, but I want you to do the same. What things going on around us, both in our own lives and our own minds and hearts, but also in the conversation in the world around us, what set of ideas or what solutions, ways of thinking are being generated here by Peter's writing and these ideas that we've unfolded to those particular issues? What are those issues? I'd like you to identify at least one or two of those before we come together on Sunday. So again, with that, I'll give you my summary thoughts here, that because of the incredible mercy and love that God has shown us in Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, as the one who succeeded where Israel failed, that renewed vocation and task and work on God's behalf and on behalf of the world has now included us by faith. This is the foundation of our identity and purpose, of which we must be firmly convinced if we are to be fruitful despite opposition and difficulties. Peter will begin to talk about that in the passages that we have ahead of us. That's what it means to be at home with God. And I wanted to include one other quote that from the book here, The New Testament in His World, that hits on the title. I didn't know this when I titled this series, but it just drove it home. There's a passage here that talks about the argument of 1 Peter, and it's interesting that he has a quote here that says, divine mercy has resulted in a new birth into a living hope. The new birth is neither a conversion to our authentic inner self, nor a migration of the soul into a heavenly realm, but a translation of a person into the house of God erected in the midst of the world. Let me say that again, wonderfully put. The new birth, what it means to be born again into God's family, is neither a conversion to our authentic inner self. We don't find ourselves or who we truly are. We are given a new self. Nor a migration of the soul into a heavenly realm. We don't leave this world or begin thinking about this not being a place where we belong. But a translation of a person into the house of God erected in the midst of the world. Think about that in light of what it means to be a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a temple that Christ himself is building for his own habitation in the world, and what's pointing to what God is ultimately going to do for the whole world. Have a blessed day. Hope you get a chance to think through these things carefully, and again, just bless you all and encourage you one way or another. Move heaven and earth to be together with us on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. or online with us. We need you. We need each other. And I'm concerned about just any gaps in our communication or contact with one another, because it will help us cause us not to be as effective and fruitful in the task that God has given us here. You're all very, very important in that and need to be fully established and growing in your experience in that as well. And that's what our times together are all about. God bless, and talk to you all very, very soon.